The obsidian hull of the Sovereign will blotted out constellations as it hung in geosynchronous orbit above New Dakota. Within its command nexus, bathed in the cool, sterile light of holographic displays, Commander Vrax surveyed the insignificant blue and brown sphere below. His carapace, the deep violet of twilight nebulae, pulsed faintly with satisfaction. Another acquisition. Another species to fold. The air hummed with the subdued power of the Imperium's might, a fleet of 20 sleek cruisers, their weapon ports dark but undeniably menacing, a silent testament to millennia of unchallenged dominance. Assessment complete, Commander, droned Subcommander Zeth, his multifaceted eyes reflecting scrolling data streams. Terran colony designation, New Dakota. Primary exports, rare earth minerals, agricultural surplus. Defensive capabilities, negligible. Garrison, 1 Terran Marine Battalion, designation Helljumpers, estimated strength, 500 combatants. Primitive projectile and directed energy weaponry. No orbital defenses detected. Zeth's mandibles clicked dismissively. Psychological profile aligns with standard Terran parameters. High individualistic tendencies, documented aversion to large-scale conflict since planetary unification. Probability of capitulation under demonstration of force, 98.7%. Vrax allowed a low, resonant hum to vibrate within his thoracic cavity. Humans, fragile bipeds, barely past their cradle world. Scattered, squabbling factions barely held together by their United Nations. History showed it clearly. They flinched from the true cost of interstellar war. They built, they traded, they talked. A species softened by peace. They fear the abyss war opens, Vrax stated, his voice like stones grinding deep underground. They fear the loss, the chaos. It makes them predictable. Weak. He gestured towards the main viewer, zooming in on the cluster of prefabricated domes and rugged mining outposts clinging to a river valley. Liberty Point. A laughable name for such a fragile foothold. Transmit the standard compliance ultimatum. Unconditional surrender of the colony and its resources. 24 Terran hours. Emphasize the consequences of defiance. He pictured the inevitable scene. Panicked civilians, fearful soldiers, a hastily arranged delegation waving a white flag. Standard procedure. Efficient. The ultimatum hit the colonial comnet like a physical blow, a burst of harsh, alien glyphs resolving into guttural galactic common. In the dim, reinforced bunker serving as the HQ for the 1st Battalion, United States Marine Corps Expeditionary Force, Colonel Jack Reaper Hayes didn't flinch. He stood ramrod straight beside the flickering tactical holotable, his face a landscape of weathered granite beneath a regulation buzzcut. The lines around his ice-blue eyes deepened as the translated words, unconditional surrender, immediate compliance, orbital sanction, echoed in the sudden, thick silence. 500 Marines. Against a fleet that could glass the continent. Standard doctrine screamed retreat, negotiate, survive. A muscle ticked in Hayes's jaw. He saw the tension coiling in the shoulders of his staff. Major Chen, stoic but pale. Captain Rossi, fingers tightening unconsciously on her datapad. The young comms sergeant swallowing hard. Fear was present, yes, a cold serpent in the gut. But in Hayes, in the faces he scanned, it was submerged beneath something hotter, denser. Outrage. A deep, primal resentment at the sheer, smug presumption of it. They think, Hayes stated, his voice a low rasp that cut through the silence like a knife, we're scared. He didn't raise it. He didn't need to. The quiet intensity filled the room. They think we see their big, shiny toys and we piss ourselves and beg. He tapped the hollow table, illuminating the rugged topography surrounding Liberty Point, jagged mesas, deep ravines, labyrinthine abandoned mine networks. They think fear means surrender. A cold, predatory glint entered his eyes, the look that earned him the callsign Reaper back on the Martian dust belt. Let's educate them. Outside, the reaction wasn't fear, but volcanic fury. Miners downed tools, their faces smudged with ore dust and etched with defiance. Farmers arrived in battered all-terrain vehicles, cradling well-maintained hunting rifles alongside military-issue pulse carbines. Old man Henderson, who'd fought in the Belt skirmishes decades ago, spat on the dusty ground. "Surrender my ass. That's my claim thereafter." The colonial governor, her voice tight with anger but steady, cummed Hayes. "Colonel, Liberty Point stands with you. Tell us what you need." It wasn't blind bravery. It was the fierce, stubborn independence bred into frontier settlers, an absolute refusal to be bullied off land they'd bled for. Hayes absorbed it, channeling the raw defiance into cold calculus. Conventional defense was suicide. Fortifying Liberty Point meant turning it into their tomb. He saw the Imperium's play, land overwhelming force, crush resistance swiftly, minimize damage to the prize. They expected either abject surrender or a doomed, heroic last stand. Hayes offered them neither. "Rossi," he snapped. "Scramble all recon drones. Full passive sweep. I want every possible approach vector to Liberty Point mapped, every fold in the terrain, every damn rabbit hole. Chen, coordinate with Militia Command. I need their best scouts, the ones who know the backcountry like their own faces. And every ounce of mining explosives they can spare. Not for fortifications. For gifts." A grim smile touched his lips. "We're throwing a party at Liberty Point. And we ain't staying for the cleanup." The plan crystallized with brutal pragmatism. Liberty Point wasn't a fortress, it was bait. A beautifully wrapped, explosive-laden trap. Hayes visualized the Imperium shuttles descending into the designated landing zone, the confidence of conquerors. He pictured the moment their boots hit the dust, the arrogant certainty preceding the detonation of hidden charges beneath their feet. Ambush teams, not dug into trenches, but dispersed and concealed in the surrounding badlands, in sniper nests atop mesas, within the shadowed mouths of old mine shafts, behind natural rock formations. They wouldn't hold ground, they'd bleed the enemy dry from 100 hidden cuts. Tech sergeants were already cannibalizing mining lasers, jury-rigging power cells, turning industrial tools into terrifyingly effective anti-armor weapons. ECM specialists worked feverishly, cobbling together jammers from colony comms arrays, aiming to blind and confuse the invaders. Standing at the bunker entrance later, Hayes watched the sun dip towards the saw-toothed horizon, painting the sky in bloody hues. Below, the lights of Liberty Point glowed, a defiant spark against the gathering twilight. Settlers, under the grim supervision of marine engineers, moved with quiet purpose, not building defenses, but meticulously sabotaging their own town, laying intricate patterns of death beneath the dusty streets. There was no panic, only a focused, terrifying resolve. Hayes felt the weight of command, the lives entrusted to his ruthless strategy. He wasn't fighting for glory or empire. He was fighting to make the cost of taking this worthless patch of rock so astronomically high, so soaked in alien blood, that even the mighty Imperium would choke on it. Liberty Point ain't worth. Commander Kale of the Tarkhan shock troopers surveyed the silent, dusty streets of Liberty Point through his visor's enhanced optic. Nothing moved but wind-whipped debris. A derelict groundcar sat abandoned near the prefab community hall. Pathetic, he thought, mandibles clicking with contempt. The landing zone, a wide, flat expanse near the settlement's edge, was clear. Just as predicted. These humans had either fled or were cowering indoors, awaiting the inevitable. Perimeter secure. He barked into the squad comm, his voice metallic through the helmet filter. First wave disembark. Standard pacification pattern alpha. Confidence radiated from his armored carapace, a deep cobalt sheen under New Dakota's harsh sun. This wasn't conquest, it was collection. His troops, disciplined blocks of violet-armored might, fanned out with practiced precision, heavy plasma rifles held ready but angled downward. No need. The silence confirmed Vrax's assessment. Humans broke easily. Sergeant Rosa Dusty Morales lay perfectly still beneath a thermal diffusion tarp 50 meters away, nestled within the skeletal remains of a collapsed ore processor. Dust caked her face, mingling with sweat. Her breath was a shallow whisper, her finger featherlight on the detonator trigger linked to the primary charge cluster buried beneath the LZ's packed earth. Through the scope of her mag rifle, she watched the arrogant giant strut. Come on, pretty boys. Just a little further in. Her comm bead crackled softly, Colonel Hayes's voice calm, final. Light 'em up, Dusty. All sectors, execute. No fanfare. No dramatics. Pure, cold purpose. Morales squeezed the trigger. The ground beneath the Tarkhan first wave ceased to exist. A concussive roar, deeper and more visceral than any starship weapon, tore the air. Packed earth and pulverized rock erupted in a geyser of destruction. Fuel-air mixtures, scavenged from colony mining stores and jury-rigged with terrifying efficiency, ignited instantaneously. The thermal bloom washed over Morales's position even through her cover. She didn't flinch. Through the scope, the world became a fragmented nightmare. Armored figures ripped apart, vaporized, or hurled like broken toys through the suddenly opaque, dust-choked air. Secondary charges, hidden in seemingly innocuous piles of rubble and abandoned ground car chassis, detonated in a cascading symphony of obliteration, shredding disciplined formations into panicked, isolated knots. Open fire. All points. Morales's command cut through the fading echoes of the blast. Her voice held no rage, only lethal focus. From concealed spider holes in basements, from sniper nests camouflaged atop sturdy water towers, from the shadowed mouths of drainage tunnels, hell rained down. High-velocity mag rifle rounds, designed to pierce light vehicle armor, punched through Tarkhan chest plates with sickening crunches. Recoilless rifle teams, positioned on higher ground overlooking the chaos, sent hypervelocity slugs screaming into clusters of stunned survivors, turning them into crimson mist. Jury-rigged mining lasers, humming with overclocked power, lanced out with searing blue-white beams, slicing through armored limbs and torsos with terrifying ease, leaving cauterized stumps and molten metal. The air filled not with disciplined volleys, but with the chaotic, overlapping staccato of human weapons and the guttural screams of dying aliens. Cale reeled, thrown to his knees by the initial blast wave. His visor flickered, diagnostics screaming about compromised integrity and multiple squad icons winking out. The dust choked his external filters. Through the swirling grit, he saw glimpses of carnage that defied comprehension. Tarkhans weren't just dying, they were being dismantled. Ambushers didn't hold ground, they struck from impossible angles and vanished. A sniper's round cracked the helmet of the trooper beside him, spraying violet ichor across Cale's visor. Another soldier, rushing towards perceived cover behind the derelict ground car, vanished in a secondary explosion that tore the vehicle apart. Close ranks. Suppressive fire on those ridge lines. Cale bellowed, his voice tight with burgeoning panic. But the enemy wasn't massed on ridgelines. They were everywhere and nowhere. They bled his forces drop by drop, shot by shot, trap by trap. This wasn't war as he knew it, it was butchery orchestrated by ghosts. High above, Vrax watched the tactical feed dissolve into static-laced chaos. Heat blooms obscured Liberty Point. Loss indicators cascaded down his command console in a relentless, sickening scroll. Orbital suppression. Target those ambush zones. He roared at the weapons officer. Negative, Commander, came the frantic reply. Sensors degraded by intense ground-level ECM, origin unknown. Targeting solutions impossible without unacceptable collateral damage to the resource extraction sites. High Command forbids bombardment. Vrax slammed a fist onto the console, the polished surface cracking. He was impotent, a god denied his thunder, forced to watch his finest warriors die in the dirt to an enemy who refused to fight fairly. Down below, the Tarkhan retreat became a shambling rout. Shuttles, responding to Kale's desperate pleas, descended through the smoke and dust, thrusters flaring as they sought clear landing spots near the shattered perimeter. Morales, spotting the vulnerable silhouettes through a momentary break in the haze, keyed her calm, dragon teeth. This is Dusty. Target package inbound. Engines and struts. Make it count. On a hidden ridge overlooking the carnage, a team of Marines and militia techs manned 3 heavily modified, tripod-mounted mining lasers, their coolant lines hissing steam. Aim small, their corporal muttered, sighting on the lead shuttle's complex landing gear assembly as it flared for touchdown. Fire! 3 intense beams lanced out, converging not on the armored belly, but on the thinner metal joints and thruster nozzles. The lead shuttle shrieked as superheated metal sheared. It listed violently, crashing into the ground in a fireball that engulfed retreating Tarkans. Another shuttle took a beam through a primary engine, spinning out of control and plowing into a cluster of prefab. Panic seized the remaining pilots. They veered away, abandoning their comrades to the slaughter. Morales watched the surviving Tarkans, broken and leaderless, trying desperately to form defensive perimeters that dissolved under relentless, precise fire. Helljumpers, Dusty. Objective achieved. Disengage and withdraw. Pattern echo. Silently, efficiently, the ambush teams ceased fire. They slithered back into tunnels, vanished into ravines, faded into the Badlands like vengeful spirits. Within minutes, only the groans of the dying, the crackle of fires, and the choking dust remained where disciplined soldiers had stood. Kale crawled from beneath the smoldering wreckage of a shuttle wing, his armor scorched and cracked. He looked out over a landscape transformed into a charnel house. Shattered carapaces littered the ground. The stench of vaporized flesh and molten metal was overwhelming. He fumbled for his calm, his voice a broken rasp, stripped of all arrogance, all certainty. Sovereign will *. Commander Vrax. Landing force annihilated. 70% casualties. Minimal enemy contact. The bridge of the Sovereign Will was a tomb wrapped in the hum of strained engines and the stink of ozone and fear. Commander Vrax stood rigid before the central hololith, the carnage below rendered in chilling detail. Heat signatures fading into cold blue, clusters of vital signs winking out, the scattered, panicked remnants of Kale's force huddled amidst the ruins of Liberty Point. Subcommander Zeth's voice, stripped of its usual drone, vibrated with barely contained panic. Commander Vrax. Shock Commander Kale reports catastrophic degradation of operational capability. Estimated combat effectiveness below 20%. Enemy combatants vanished. Minimal visual contact maintained throughout the engagement. Losses unsustainable. Vrax's carapace felt brittle, the deep violet dulled under the harsh bridge lights. He had watched the feed disintegrate into static-laced horror, the brutal efficiency of the ambush, the calculated savagery, the disappearance of the enemy after inflicting maximum damage. This wasn't defeat, it was evisceration. Vanished. His voice scraped like gravel. An entire battalion decimated by ghosts? Affirmative, Commander, Zeth stammered. Initial reports describe improvised weaponry of devastating effect, total disregard for conventional defensive structures, mastery of terrain, and extreme aggression. Shock Commander Kale's final transmission indicated. Zeth hesitated, mandibles trembling. A belief the enemy possesses no concept of honorable warfare. Only annihilation. Annihilation. The word hung in the sterile air, colder than the void beyond the viewports. Vrax saw the smug certainty of high command shatter. He saw his career dissolving in the blood-soaked dust of this insignificant world. They don't fear war. They redefine it. The thought was a blade twisting in his psyche. Below, in a concealed ravine 10 clicks from the charnel house of Liberty Point, Colonel Hayes surveyed the returning ambush teams through dust-caked optic. Exhaustion etched deep lines on every face, but beneath the grime and the adrenaline crash burned a fierce, hard-edged triumph. Medics moved efficiently among the few wounded. Tech Sergeant Briggs was already directing militia engineers, their eyes wide with awe, as they stripped components from salvaged Tarkon plasma rifles and cracked chest plate. Focus on power cells and sensor suites, people. We ain't mounting trophies, we're building nightmares. Briggs barked. The raw, brutal pragmatism of survival. Hayes felt no elation, only the cold weight of the next move. They'd drawn first blood, deep and shocking, but the beast in orbit was wounded, not slain. Retreat? Possible, perhaps, for a handful, but abandoning New Dakota, leaving the settlers who'd fought beside them? Unthinkable. Make the cost too high. His original strategy crystallized into a new, terrifying doctrine. He turned to Captain Rossi, her datapad displaying the chaotic, fragmented signals still emanating from the shattered Imperium ground force and their orbiting masters. Patch me through, Rossi. Fleet command frequency. Unencrypted. Wide beam. Rossi's eyes widened fractionally, but her fingers flew. Channel open, Colonel. You're broadcasting. Hayes leaned towards the mic, his voice devoid of theatrics, cold as lunar rock. Imperium Command Ship Sovereign Will, this is Colonel Jack Hayes, United States Marine Corps, commanding Terran Forces, New Dakota. Transmission follows. A burst of compressed data streamed out, a grainy, stabilized footage captured by helmet cams and drones. Tarkon soldiers disintegrating under mining lasers, shuttles crashing in flames, panicked retreats through booby-trapped street. Raw, uncensored carnage. Then his voice returned, flat, absolute. Visual confirmation, your landing force is neutralized. Survivors are combat ineffective. We hold your personnel designations, your equipment schematics salvaged intact. He paused, letting the implications sink in. Intelligence beyond price, ripped from their dead. New Dakota is under Terran sovereignty. Attempt another landing operation within this planetary sphere, and we will kill every soldier you deploy. We will destroy every shuttle or dropship that breaches our atmosphere. We will make the cost of your aggression unbearable. You have 12 Terran hours to withdraw all fleet assets beyond this system's Oort cloud. Compliance is your only rational option. Hayes out. The transmission cut. The ravine held its breath. It wasn't a boast. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the chilling certainty of a man who had just demonstrated his capacity to fulfill every word. Aboard the Sovereign Will, Vrax flinched as Hayes's icy pronouncement echoed through the bridge, followed by the horrifyingly efficient slaughter reel. The raw footage was worse than the tactical summaries. The ruthlessness was palpable. High Command's response was immediate and fractured. Flooding his calm, hawks screamed for orbital purification, to scour the continent clean. Pragmatists, voices laced with a new, unfamiliar tremor, countered. And sacrifice the resources and confirm this American savagery exists elsewhere? What if Terra itself fights like this? The specter Hayes had unleashed, the fear of a species that embraced war's darkest aspects, paralyzed imperial resolve. The political cost of losing a fleet element to a minor colony became a chasm they dared not leap. Vrax stared at the hololith, the blinking icons of his remaining functional shuttles, the dwindling life signs below. Hayes's deadline was a noose tightening. To stay meant committing his fleet to a grinding, costly ground war against an invisible, vicious enemy who thrived in chaos. It meant potentially sacrificing the Sovereign Will itself to salvaged mining lasers and human ingenuity. It meant validating Hayes's threat. The humiliation was galactic, personal, absolute. But the alternative was annihilation of his command. Navigation, Vrax commanded, his voice hollow, stripped of all authority. Plot course for system egress. Maximum safe acceleration. Recall all remaining shuttles. Immediate withdrawal. The order hung in the stunned silence. It was the unthinkable. Retreat. From humans. Hayes watched the massive, obsidian shapes of the Imperium fleet ignite their drives, turning ponderously against the starfield. They didn't bombard. They didn't linger. They fled. A ragged cheer started among the settlers and militia, but Hayes raised a gauntlet hand, silencing it. His eyes, still glacier blue, scanned the departing leviathans, then swept across the exhausted, determined faces around him. Marines already cleaning weapons, settlers hauling salvaged alien composites to reinforce the ravine walls, techs jury-rigging Imperium sensors into early warning systems. "They'll be back," Hayes stated, his voice carrying easily in the sudden quiet. "Or someone else will. We bought time. Now we build. Harder. Faster. Meaner." There was no celebration in his words, only the relentless grind of survival. The victory was real, but it was the first battle in a war they now knew was coming. The settlers nodded, grim understanding replacing fleeting triumph. Hammers started ringing on alien metal, transforming salvage into fortifications. The legend of the Helljumpers and Liberty Point was born, not in glory, but in blood and terrifying resolve. The silence on New Dakota felt different now. Not the tense quiet before the storm, but the deep, watchful hush after an earthquake, where the ground still hums with latent power. Colonel Hayes stood on the newly reinforced observation platform overlooking the main ravine settlement, now unofficially dubbed Reaper's Hold. Below, the air thrummed not with fear, but relentless industry. Hammers rang against salvaged Tarkhan armor plating being shaped into blast walls. Sparks flew as militia welders, guided by marine engineers, fused alien composites over rock faces. Tech Sergeant Briggs barked orders at a team jury-rigging a salvaged Imperium sensor array into a planetary early warning net. "Make it talk Terran, you maggots. I want to see a sneeze in the Oort cloud." Every shattered carapace, every scorched piece of starship hull, was being dismantled, analyzed, and repurposed with ruthless efficiency. Victory hadn't brought rest, it had forged a harder resolve. A settler, her face still smudged with ash from Liberty Point, handed Hayes a steaming mug of bitter local root coffee. "Heard the buzz, Colonel?" Folks down in Gamma Shaft pulled a mostly intact power core from one o' them crashed shuttles. "Briggs reckons he can make it sing." Hayes nodded, taking the mug. The warmth was welcome against the planet's creeping chill. His eyes, perpetually scanning the horizon, held no triumph, only the granite weight of foresight. "Good," he rasped. "Sing loud. And make sure it sings for us next time." The woman nodded, a fierce pride replacing the lingering shadow of fear. They weren't just survivors anymore, they were architects of their own terrifying legend. Aboard the retreating Sovereign Will, the silence was a suffocating shroud. Commander Vrax stared at the tactical display showing empty space where New Dakota's star had been. The hum of the jump drive was a mocking purr. Subcommander Zeth approached, his usual drone replaced by a hesitant whisper. "Commander Vrax. Priority communique from High Command Segment Alpha. They demand clarification. The casualty reports, the withdrawal." Zeth trailed off, unable to articulate the magnitude of the disgrace. "Clarification." Vrax's voice was a dry rasp, his carapace dull, almost ashen. He gestured weakly towards a secondary screen replaying Hayes's cold transmission. "The carnage, the ultimatum, the absolute certainty. That is the clarification, Zeth. We misjudged the fundamental nature of the prey. We prodded a creature we believed timid and found a apex predator honed by forgotten wars." He closed his eyes, the images burned into his mind. The brutal efficiency, the disregard for their own structures, the terrifying speed with which industrial tools became instruments of annihilation. Send them the full sensor logs. Send them Hayes's manifesto. And tell them. He paused, the words tasting like ash. Tell them to reassess all Terran threat projections. Not just the Americans. All of them. If one backwater colony harbors such ferocity. The implication hung heavy. What did Terra itself hold? The bridge crew avoided his gaze. The invincible Imperium had not just been bloodied, its foundational myth of inevitable dominance lay shattered on the dusty plains of a world they deemed insignificant. The fear wasn't just of defeat, it was of the unknown ferocity they might have unleashed across the galactic stage. The ripples spread faster than light. Encrypted bursts, smuggled data crystals, frantic whispers in the bazaars of subjugated worlds. On Xylos Prime, a furred laborer paused while hauling Imperium ore, hearing a snippet of a guard's hushed, disbelieving conversation. Americans tore them apart, like animals. A spark, faint but undeniable, flickered in the laborer's weary eyes. On the trade hub of Cygnus Minor, a disgraced Kaldorian prince, drinking away his exile, overheard merchants boasting about diverted shipments bound for some dust ball called New Dakota, place that sent the Violet Fleet packing. The prince's hand tightened on his glass. Hope, long extinguished, felt like a phantom limb. Within Terran space, the official channels buzzed with cautious diplomacy, downplaying the incident, emphasizing local colonial resilience. But on the hypernet, in veteran halls, in the grimy engine rooms of freighter fleets, the raw, uncensored feeds from New Dakota, smuggled out by militia comtechs, spread like wildfire. Grainy footage of Tarkhan shock troopers evaporating under mining lasers, of shuttles crashing in flames, of Hayes's ice-cold ultimatum. Not propaganda. Proof. In a smoky bar on Mars, grizzled belters watched the footage on a flickering screen. One spat on the deck. Helljumpers. Hayes. Knew that Sanuvabitch back on series. Told ya. You don't poke the bear. Another grinned, a feral flash of metal teeth. Bear? Nah. That's a wolverine. Small mean, and'll rip your face off for lookin' at it funny. Ruthless Americans. Damn right. A sense of grim, defiant pride, long buried under bureaucratic caution, began to stir. The story mutated, grew talons and teeth. The stand at Reaper's Hold, the ghosts of Liberty Point. Hayes stood once more on the platform as New Dakota's primary sun dipped below the mesas, painting the salvage-strewn valley in shades of blood and bronze. Captain Rossi approached, datapad in hand. Colonel. Latest deep space scan. No hostiles in system. Early warning net is optimistic. Settlers report morale high but focused. She paused, then added quietly, the hypernet chatter. It's spreading, sir. Our methods. Hayes didn't turn, his gaze fixed on the fading light. Let it spread, he said, his voice low but carrying the weight of forged steel. Let the galaxy chew on it. Let the Imperium choke on it. He finally looked at her, the glacier blue eyes reflecting the dying fire of the sunset. We showed him the teeth. Now they gotta wonder about the bite waiting at home. He gestured towards the bustling ravine below, where the clang of hammers on alien metal was a constant, defiant heartbeat. This ain't over, Rossi. This is just the first note. They know we're here now. They know what happens when they kick the hive. He took a long sip of the bitter coffee, the steam curling like gun smoke in the cool air. So we build. We watch. And we make damn sure the next time they come, they remember the price. He turned back to the darkening horizon, a silhouette against the bruised twilight, not a conqueror, but a sentinel forged in fire, standing guard over a hard-won peace that felt less like an end, and more like the coiled pause before an inevitable, greater storm. The silence now held the echo of shattering empires and the sharp, anticipatory tang of futures written in blood and salvaged steel.